Okay, so we start our lecture after the break. And now we are going to start our next chapter from the book Learning Python Network Programming by Sarkar and Washington. As I mentioned in the previous class as well, that I will try to focus using these books. That book specifically for the rest of our, the course. And I have shared this book, and you can download the PDF from ITEL. So the next chapter we are going to discuss is regarding the API. So API in action is the name of the chapter from the book. And why we are going to study API. So before we move, just quickly go through the content. So we are going to study the introduction to the web APIs in the Python, working with XML in Python, Amazon S3 API data storage service, JSON data format for the web APIs, Twitter API, and zero auth 1 authentication, handling error in APIs, creating and managing buckets and AWS 3, authentication and security in API, screening, screen scraping and HTML parsing using Boto package for the API, AWS API, and handling HTTP request and response. And in the end, best practices for the API development. So before I further move forward, can someone confirm my loud? Am I loud? My voice is clear.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, really clear.
Okay. Thank you very much. So understanding the role of the API. So when we look about the API in relation to the Python, we usually refer to these classes and the function that module presents to use and interact with. So in the previous chapters, we studied the URL lib package, or the library, or we studied the requests package. So these are the packages which are available for the Python, and they help us to play with all these HTTP and web requests. So same we are going to study here for web APIs. So a web API is a type of API that you interact with through the HTTP protocol. So in previous classes, we have a little bit concept of API, right? So basically APIs are the application. What is API? Can someone tell me the full form of API? I hope all of you have the access to the Google, and quickly you can type in the chat, or you can just open your mic. What is API? No response yet. Yes, application program interface. Okay, so using this interface, you can interact with the program or the applications sometimes without having human interaction. So nowadays, many web services provide a set of HTTP calls which are designed to be used programmatically by the client. That is, they are meant to be used by machines rather than the human. So through these interface, it's possible to automate interaction with the services and perform tasks such as extracting data, configuring the services in some way, and uploading your own content into the service. So in this chapter, we will look the two popular data exchange formats. One is the XML, another one is the JSON. Okay, so how to interact with the two major web APIs? We just gone through the table of content as well. So Python interacts with the web APIs like AWS 3 or Twitter, and some more as well. So we are going to start introducing how XML is used in the Python. So XML, or extensible markup language, is a way of representing hierarchical data. So how it works? Basically, it sets the data in hierarchical form. So working with XML based APIs, we will be creating XML documents and sending them as the body of HTTP request and receiving XML documents as the body of the HTTP response. So you remember that in the previous chapter, we just finished some part of that. We learned how we send the HTTP request, and we know that the body of the HTTP message contains the files. We remember that when I told you about what is the response we get when we put some request for URL. So in the response, we get some files, right? Maybe it's HTML file, maybe it's some image, maybe it's some video. So that XML files are used for the sending or receiving the. We use the HTTP and we send the XML. So if you have coded with HTML before, then this maybe looks familiar. So XML is a markup based format. It is from the same family of language as HTML, and the data is structured in the hierarchy form by the element. Each element is represented by two tags. So the start tag, for example, the name. Suppose we put name with some, and the matching tag and with some example like names with the slash. Like suppose we have some example here. So like suppose if the start tag. So this is the start tag for the name, and for the end of this we will see this. That's how we code. Any of you have idea using XML? Any experience using XML before? Anyone in the class? Yes, no, please respond.
No.
No one use XML? No. Okay, never mind. It's not a big deal. The only important point is learn how to the use it, and then in this lecture we are going to learn some Python packages which we will be using to create the XML. So XML is nothing very the some programming. It's not sort of big programming language. It's markup language. So markup based format basically. So we're creating XML based document, and we can use XML for multiple purposes. So we just saw that how we start. We start with a tag, like suppose we just saw a tag and end with the tag with the slash. So between these two tags, we can either put data such as the carefully, like suppose here we just see this carefully here. We can just put the data, or maybe we can have some other things. So for the add more text and which represent the child element. So first element, then we can have some child element. So unlike HTML, XML is designed such that we can define our own tags and create our own data formats. So also unlike HTML, the XML syntax is always strictly enforced. So whereas HTML, small mistakes such as tag being closed in the wrong order, closing tag missing altogether, or attribute values missing quotes are tolerated. But in XML, no. If you made a mistake, you will get an error. So in XML, these mistakes will result completely unreadable XML document. Okay. So this is an example code of the XML. So this is a text representation of the XML document. So here we start like this format. We provide version. Then suppose we are creating hierarchical. So we will discuss these further. Okay, so now we move to the Amazon S3 API. So Amazon S3 is a data storage service. How many of you know about Amazon S3 or S3 bucket?
Not
Anyone
really
has idea?
familiar with.
Sorry, repeat.
I'm not really familiar with Amazon S3.
So basically, Amazon S3 is a storage service. Like suppose the simple storage service we use, like the Google Drive or Dropbox or OneDrive. But this Amazon storage is something a little bit different from these storage devices, because most of the Google Drive or OneDrive we use for our personal use, and we have some the programming interfaces, like the OneDrive software, or we use website to deal with them. So but this Amazon S3 storage service, uh, it's a high profile web service, you might say. Despite offering enterprise grade resilience, performance, and feature, it's pretty easy to start and it's affordable. Basically, this is a paid service from AWS. So you can just start up AWS portfolio and API change every day now, and you can usually use the REST API to interact with this. So basically, it's used for storage. Like suppose you can upload your documents, you can manage documents, you can call some storage documents from them, and it can be used for the many purposes as a storage, right? So maybe you upload your pictures, your web page related to the files. But I'm not going to teach this AWS S3 in details, but you just go through that. You can organize the data into the bucket and objects, and buckets are like directories, and the objects are equivalent to the files. So you can have the representational state transfer REST, and it is fairly academic conception for how HTTP should be used for API. So originally presented by Roy Field in his PhD dissertation. So although the properties that an API should process so as considered RESTful are quite specific. In a practice, pretty much any API that is based on HTTP is now slapped with the RESTful label. So the S3 API is actually among the most RESTful high-profile APIs because it appropriately uses good range of HTTP methods. Right. So each bucket has a unique URL based on the bucket name and AWS region, and objects are accessed by adding object name and bucket URL path. So this is just a small intro of the the AWS 3. So why we are reading this? Because we want to learn how our APIs work, how API interact with these services. So then next, first we just go through very briefly, the XML. So for the details of XML, we will perform some lab tomorrow. So in the lab, we will go through, thoroughly, and then you will get an idea. Then for the REST API or the interaction with the AWS, we will try to do it in the lab as well. So here we just get just basic intro of the AWS S3. So or maybe I give you a little bit more about AWS S3, if just to provide an idea, because none of you has experience using AWS before. So let me try to find some slides from my previous course. Quickly, I will try to discuss, the AWS. just trying to give you a basic. Okay, so let me try to share this one. Okay, so basically this, this is Amazon S3 is a managed cloud storage, and that designed for scalable seamlessly. That provides you the services. So what basically it provides you some storage of the bucket. Bucket is just a concept of, you might say, the name of brand name, you might say, the as AWS provided for this storage service. So buckets are name of universal and must be unique. So any bucket will be having a unique URL for their name and cannot be having same. Like suppose you create a Gmail login name, right? So that is unique. The same, the bucket names are unique. So data that is stored in Amazon S3 is not associated with any particular server. So you need to manage your infrastructure yourself. And the things are placed as object, like such as image, videos, server logs. So you can just use it. And that, Amazon S3 provides a low latency access to data over the internet using HTTP protocol or secure HTTPS, and that is why we can interact with this, the API. Okay, so these are some basic informations. So like suppose here, if you want to upload your data, so create a bucket in AWS region. So region is area distributed by the AWS. So this is an example of bucket path using URL points, endpoints. So like suppose this is HTTPS S3, then this is the region node port. So whatever region we then Amazon AWS.com and then slash the bucket name. So the bucket virtual hosted style URL endpoint, it's like this, right? So these are some basic, the basics. Like suppose if you want to, when you create a bucket on S3, it is associated with a specific region. So when you store your bucket, it's redundantly stored across multiple AWS facilities. Like suppose in a region you created your bucket on this specific facility. Facility means their data center. So they will make redundant, the backups as well. And also automatically it manages the storage behind the bucket. So suppose if you are creating something on some of the, the bucket, multiple objects, so it will handle itself. So I think that is the just one or two information as well. So like suppose you can use AWS Management Console. Management Console is a web-based console which is provided by the AWS. You can use the AWS web. Then you can use command line to interact, and you can use the SDK. So SDK, AWS SDK also access data. You can use the directly using REST-based API or REST-based endpoint, and for that purpose you can use the HTTP or HTTPS. So I think that is enough information for now. And if you want, you can read by yourself using internet, and it's very easy to get nowadays information. So let me stop this one and share the other slide again. Okay, so as I mentioned that regarding the S3 bucket, we will try to do something tomorrow lab, inshallah, hopefully. So now we move to the JSON data format and web APIs. So utilizing JSON. So JSON is JavaScript object notation. Anyone experience with JSON? Anyone knows what is JSON? Yes. Are you guys still there? Okay, at least someone knows, right? Right. So this is basically JavaScript object notation is a standard way of representing simple objects such as list, dict in the form of text string. So although it is originally developed for the JavaScript, JSON is a language independent and most language can work with it. So again, this JSON is a standard for representing simple objects. So it's lightweight, yet flexible enough to handle a broad range of data. This makes it ideal for exchange the data over HTTP, and a large number of web APIs use the primary JSON. So you see in the JSON format. So JSON can easily converted from the Python objects and JSON string using the JSON.dump, and vice versa using JSON.load. So Python's JSON module is used for working with the JSON in the Python. So we will learn how Python interacts with the JSON, and in the tomorrow's lecture we will do some examples. So in the JSON, when we use the JSON module for working with the JSON and Python, so we will do some examples. So in the short we can just create using JSON, and it's very the big and very good package. Then we move to the Twitter API and OAuth 1 authentication. So anyone has experience using Twitter API, or how API work in Twitter? Anyone has experience with the Twitter API, or you have idea what it can do? Anyone? So seems no one has idea. Not only automate tweets, yeah, that is one part of the automation also. But a lot of the data extraction and sentiment analysis regarding machine learning things. So you can use Twitter for a lot of things. So one of this is automating a tweet. Yes, scraping tweets. Yes. So the Twitter API provide access to all the function that we may want to the client to perform. So with the Twitter API, we can create clients that search for recent tweets, find out what's trending, look uh, up user details, follow users' timelines, and even act on behalf of the users by posting tweets and direct message for them. So we will be looking at Twitter API version 1.1 in according to this book. The version current is you can find the overview using the documentation given here. Okay, so before we move, just a little bit more about the Twitter API. So to illustrate some of the functionalities of the Twitter API, we are going to write the code of a simple Twitter world clock, and our application will periodically post the Twitter account. And then we will use the authentication for the Twitter. So similar to the previous section S3, we will do this in the tomorrow's lab. So we will use the registering our application for API, and we can do the authentication, sharing the keys, and we will use the Twitter client to make all these jobs for us, and then polling for the tweets timely and processing the tweets, some sort of processing, like suppose you want to get some specific information from the tweet, so you can do all these things. Okay, so that we will try to cover in hopefully tomorrow lab. Then we have handling errors in the API. So error handling strategies. So utilize element tree. So element tree is basically a Python package for extracting relevant information from the XML error messages. So as we will discuss this element tree in the tomorrow's lab, so we can understand how we can get and extract the data. Then implement a specific error handling function like handle error response for clear messages. We can use these handle stages. Find method to extract the first method element for the error. So for the API errors, when we are using these API, so we can use this elementary for text. And then troubleshooting and debugging techniques. So for replace XML print, pretty print, this is a package name, and R text with the handle error R to improve the error message display. So we will do this practice tomorrow again in the lab. We will try to find out how it works. So then we can employ, for troubleshooting, we can employ another method called find all method to retrieve the list of direct that is also a searching method, like as we mentioned that our XML is a hierarchical way to represent the data. So as I mentioned in a few minutes ago, that we create some object and then we have some children objects, so we can find all. Then to enhance the error handling by structured code and reusability of adding more detail output. So these are some techniques for the handling the error in the this specific packages. Then we have some, the practice using the creating and managing the S3 bucket. The S3 bucket are like directories organized. Each bucket has unique URL. We just studied bucket name and regions. Bucket names are globally unique and must be chosen carefully. Creating a bucket involves selecting a name, region, and confirming the creation. Then setting permissions and access control. So for the permission, S3 are crucial for controlling the access of bucket of the object. Now, any of you got idea about S3 bucket? What is S3 bucket? I tried to explain what it is. Using this discussion, anyone got idea what is S3? I hope someone is listening, right? Yes. Anyone, please raise your hand or type or mic, turn on mic. Yes, cloud storage. So suppose for many purposes we store our data in some space, some place. So that is a different type of S3 buckets used for this purpose. So if you go through some architecture of the websites, how the big websites work, so you need some, the different services, some authentication services, some services for the database, right? And some services for load balancing, auto scaling, and this is one of the service which is called the storage service S3. So for S3, in S3 bucket, you can store and perform some operation. So the idea for the credentials or the access. So basically, suppose if you are accessing your S3 using your login and password, so that is a human interaction. But when the APIs interact, they must have some keys to share and some permissions. Like suppose one app can edit the object, like deleting or replacing the image or uploading a video and removing the video. But there might be some applications or API which is interacting. They just need to read or they can just show. Like suppose if you are using this object stored on the S3 bucket as image for your website. So you provide this URL for your image using the bucket image, and your picture will be displayed on some of the web. So if you are using the HTTP and user is just accessing the image, if he would have access to delete, then it can damage your data, right? So that's why this the access control is very important. Or some of the APIs, they will have access to manage or delete, some they will not. So you set the permissions for the object. Access to the files can be restricted or made public based on the ACL setting. So even as a public, there are two permissions, like suppose managing or some is just accessing. So permission can be managed to ensure the secure data storage by sharing. And also the APIs interact sometimes using HTTPS. So HTTPS means that the data or communication is secure. So authentication and security in API development, ensuring the authentication in the API. So use authentication mechanism to prevent the authorized API to the features. So before we move, I think this topic you must know what are the authentication mechanism used for the the APIs or the services to work. What are the authentication mechanisms used? So authentication mechanism are used for make sure that the user is valid. It's not an invalid user, and also it's to make it secure. We put some security. So implementing authentication credentials like some login password or some the keys to be shared ensures secure request to be API. So apply per application rate limit to control the frequency of the request and prevent the abuse. Like anyone has idea this per application rate concept? Like suppose when you are using the S3 bucket, there is a limitation to access some the object, and if you have a lot of access or lot of the request for that object, so AWS will charge you more. So there is some limit that you can make until this connection in within a month. If your connections are more than that, then it means you have to pay more for this interaction because it generates more data on there. The more use of bandwidth and more use of data and more use of network. So they will charge you more. So manage delegation of access rights and allow application to act on behalf of users or other services. So that is very important. As I mentioned in some example, like suppose you have created some sort of image which is stored on the S3 bucket, and that image need to be displayed in some web, and also some other API is working on the back which changes the image according to some update. Maybe I just give a raw example just came in my mind. Suppose you have created an automated system where some IoT, the camera, it captures the image of some field and uploaded on your S3 bucket, and that you can access using your web. So that image need to be replaced by that IoT camera. So that will be using API to update the image. But the web you are using as a user, it has no right to change the image or delete the image. So that's how you deliberately define the different access level and permissions. Then you utilize the HTTP request signing mechanism for authentication and to verify the sender and prevent the tampering during transit. So you use some secure HTTPS to make that sure that your the authentication or your the data is not tampered during the transit when you are sending and receiving the data. Okay, so further we use the screen scraping, the HTML parsing. So now we move to the screen scraping and HTML parsing. So screen scraping technique are the best practices. So like suppose screen scraping is a process of extracting data from the websites by targeting specific HTML elements. So best practice includes checking a site's term and condition before scraping to avoid IP address ban. Right? Some of the websites, they don't allow bots or the programmable scrapers to access. So in that case, you will lose the access and your IP will be blocked. So selection criteria should be simple to minimize the impact on HTML changes on the scraping process. So utilize XPath for efficient element selection and extraction without exhaustion iteration. So what is the XPath? So basically, this provides us the way that how can we parse the HTML. So HTML parsing, as I mentioned, that this is to get the data. So suppose we want some data from multiple websites. So and for that purpose, there are multiple HTML parsing libraries in Python. So they are differentiated by their speed, the interfaces that they offer for navigating with the HTML documents, and their ability to handle the body of the structure of the HTML. So Python standard library does not include an object-oriented HTML parser. The universally recommended third-party package is LXML. So that is used for this purpose. So parsing the data. So using Boto package for the AWS. So leveraging Boto for AWS services, Boto package simplifies the interaction with the AWS services, provides a cleaner and simpler code for AWS operations. So we will try to cover all these because mostly is the what we call the implementation related things. So I cannot tell much about these packages in the theory. So we will discuss this Boto package for AWS in tomorrow lab when we will be discussing the details. Okay, so basically what it is, it's it's a package which when we interact with the AWS APIs, so AWS have ready to use package which exposes the functionality of the services without having dealing with the complexities of the HTTP API. So these packages generally make the code cleaner and simpler, and they should provide doing code work like they are available. So this package called Boto, uh, this package we can see how it can provide the functionalities, and we will discuss the details in tomorrow's lab. Right? So what are the so it enables easy creation and manage S3 buckets and objects, and offers ready-to-use functionalities for AWS, and enhances the security by handling authentication access to the security. So I hope you are getting idea that what we are discussing, because these are the packages used by the Python, and we will be using some APIs. Like this is an API which will interact with the AWS to facilitate our all use, the services. Then handling HTTP request and response. So optimizing HTTP requests for efficiency. Use local copies of web pages or files for testing and save bandwidth for both yourself and the website. So this is a best practice. Sometimes if you are requesting some web again and again to the server, it causes a lot of the usage of web data, or which is a bandwidth or internet. So for that purpose, this is the best practice to use the local data. So, like suppose some of the request you can fulfill from the local or the on the making caching at your own end. So every request if goes to the server, it creates a lot of traffic. So consider making using XPath query language for efficient extraction information from the document and implementing HTTP request signing mechanism for authentication, ensuring the unrelated request. Now we come to the best practice. So the best practice is implementing best practice in API development. So use web APIs that interact through HTTP protocol for automation and data extraction. So web API is best. So ensure strict enforcement of syntax and data structure in XML based and API for stability, and implementing authentication mechanism in API to prevent abuse and message access permission. So utilize HTTP request signing mechanism for authentication of AWS S3 bucket. So let me show quickly some of the examples we will be discussing tomorrow. So let me try to share my screen. So like as I mentioned that we are using this chapter number 3, Tomorrow Lab. And in Tomorrow Lab, we will start with the XML API, XML. And we just discussed that how the code looks like. Like suppose this is a hierarchical code, right? So in Tomorrow Lab, we will explore this elementary. Elementary is a Python standard library. So we will import this elementary library, and here we can learn how to create a XML document using the elementary. So like suppose if you think about this document, this hierarchical document, that seems sometimes very difficult for human being to remember the hierarchy. Like suppose you created a name carefully, and then you created cheese, and then you created the Ilchester and different inventory items, right? And then as we mentioned that there are some main object, then their child, some parents and the child concept. So making it human, it's very prone to be human error. We can have error doing this. So using these, the packages make it very easy for us to create this sort of element, the XML documents. Like suppose here in this example, we created a root called inventory, and we're using the elementary dump root, and then we created the our inventory element is empty. Now we are putting something, so we put cheese as a et element as a cheese, then we append the root cheese, and then et root dump, and then we get the inventory as a cheese as an inventory. Then in second part we add a name text carefully, and we invented our the so edit it. So then we will learn that how further implementation or editing of this the we can do using the Python. And at the end we can just print using pretty printing or option of this package et elementary. So then we can generate this, like suppose this is our document we just created, the XML document. So we will do this tomorrow practice. So basically why we are doing all this, we are learning how we create the API, how API interact with the different applications, web-based services. And nowadays it's very common to automate the system, like suppose using the S3, Amazon Web Services, different sort of automation of the servers that is also done by using HTTP or REST-based APIs. And for that purpose, as I mentioned, that XML format or JSON is used very commonly. So we will go through all these elementary in the tomorrow lab. Further, we will discuss how how to register for the AWS service, how to do the process of the authentication and ensuring, and then setting up a AWS user. I hope that we will be able to do this because this is not free service, but you can create some, the what we call the free bucket account for some time period. It give you free bucket account. So this is the view of the web-based console of the the AWS, and that's how we attach some policies. So we will go through for these AWS in tomorrow lab as well, because without performing it, I think it's just very difficult to understand. Then we will discuss this parsing of XML, how we can import the the request, and how can we parse the XML, and how can we use this element tree to make these things. So I think for today that is enough for today's class. So further we will discuss tomorrow. Any question, any query, please ask.